Power recognizes power even when it arrives quietly. The first time Kang Min-Jae saw Zara Williams, she wasn't trembling like the others. She wasn't whispering about his reputation in the marble hallway or avoiding eye contact with his security team. She walked into the towering executive office as though she belonged there, shoulders straight, chin lifted, confidence woven into every step. The building itself felt intimidating, dark glass walls, guarded elevators, silence so thick it pressed against the lungs. Most applicants lost their composure before reaching the top floor. Zara did not. Min-Jae watched her through the tinted panel behind his desk. Known across corporate and underground circles as the Ice King, he had built his empire on fear and precision. Meetings were short. Emotions were useless. Loyalty was earned through strength. Yet when Zara greeted him, her voice was calm, respectful, steady. She did not flinch beneath his assessing stare. He asked difficult questions, about pressure, secrecy, danger. She answered each one without hesitation. When he deliberately misquoted a detail from her resume to test her nerve, she corrected him politely. No apology. No arrogance. Just certainty. For the first time in years, something inside him shifted. Most people wanted proximity to power. Zara wanted purpose. She spoke about efficiency, loyalty, and earning trust. She didn't try to impress him. She simply stood firm in who she was. By the end of the interview, the room felt different. Less cold. Less sterile. Min-Jae leaned back, studying her as though solving a puzzle. "You start tomorrow?" he said finally. She nodded once, offering a composed smile before leaving. The office fell silent again, but something lingered in the air. For a man who trusted no one, Kang Min-Jae had just invited a storm into his perfectly controlled world. And he had no idea that the calm confidence of Zara Williams would be the one thing powerful enough to melt him. By Zara's third week, the building no longer felt intimidating, but the man at the top still did. Kang Min-Jae operated with mechanical precision. Meetings began exactly on time. Instructions were sharp, concise, unquestionable. Executives twice Zara's age lowered their eyes when he spoke. His presence alone could silence an entire boardroom. Yet Zara noticed what others did not. He never raised his voice unnecessarily. He never wasted words. And he never allowed chaos to show on his face, even when tension simmered beneath the surface. As his executive assistant, Zara became the gatekeeper to his world. She organized confidential schedules, filtered coded messages, and managed last-minute changes that hinted at a life beyond corporate dealings. She understood there were layers to his empire, layers she did not ask about. Unlike others, she did not gossip about him. She did not fear him either. One evening, after a particularly tense strategy meeting, Min-Jae remained seated long after everyone had left. Zara quietly entered to collect documents. She paused when she noticed the slight crease between his brows, a rare crack in his flawless composure. "You skipped lunch?" she said gently, placing a neatly packed meal on his desk. He looked up, surprised. No one monitored his well-being. They monitored his orders. "You're not required to do that," he replied coolly. "I know," she answered. "But you function better when you eat." There was no flirtation in her tone, just honesty. Something about her straightforward care unsettled him more than disobedience ever could. He studied her for a long moment before opening the meal. From that day, small changes began. He asked for her opinion during briefings. He delayed late-night dismissals if she looked exhausted. Once, when an associate spoke sharply to her, Min-Jae's glare alone silenced the room. Whispers began among his men. The Ice King was changing. But what they didn't understand was this. Zara's warmth wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, controlled. Fire that didn't burn recklessly, but glowed with quiet strength. And Min-Jae, who had mastered control over everything else in his empire, was slowly losing control over the way her presence made the cold feel less permanent. Trouble rarely announced itself politely in Kang Min-Jae's world. It arrived in coded messages, tightened security, and subtle shifts in tone. Zara sensed it before anyone explained it. The building felt different that afternoon, guards doubling positions, hushed conversations ending when she approached. Min-Jae's meetings ran longer than usual. His jaw remained set, eyes sharper than ever. By evening, the truth reached her in fragments. A rival faction within his underground network had grown bold. Lines were being tested, loyalty questioned, and somehow her name had surfaced. "She is leverage," one intercepted message claimed. Min-Jae read those words in silence. The air in his office turned dangerously cold. When Zara entered with updated schedules, she noticed the storm in his eyes. "What happened?" she asked, steady as always. "You're not going home tonight," he said. She blinked once. "Is that an order?" "It's protection." Within the hour she was escorted to his private penthouse, secured, guarded, unreachable. The city lights stretched endlessly below, glittering against the dark sky. It should have felt luxurious. Instead, tension hummed between them. "This is temporary," he assured her, standing at a careful distance. "You are safe here." "I trust that," she replied softly. Later that night, a threatening call pierced the quiet. Min-Jae's voice remained calm while he spoke, but when he ended it, something in his posture faltered. For a split second the mask slipped. The weight of responsibility, danger, and isolation pressed visibly against him. Zara stepped closer before she could overthink it. "You don't have to carry everything alone," she said. He looked at her, truly looked at her, not as an employee, not as a liability, but as someone who saw him beyond the title. Then, gently, she wrapped her arms around him. It was simple, brief, no hidden meaning, just comfort. Min-Jae stiffened at first, unfamiliar with the gesture. No one had embraced him without fear or agenda. Slowly, almost hesitantly, he allowed himself to remain there. The world outside was ruthless. But in that quiet moment, inside guarded walls, the Ice King felt something crack. And he didn't pull away. The hug lasted only seconds. But its impact lingered for days. When morning came, Zara expected distance. She expected Min-Jae to retreat behind the polished mask he wore so well. Instead, something subtle had shifted. He did not mention the night. He did not reference the embrace. Yet the way he looked at her changed. Back at headquarters, his authority remained unquestioned. Orders were sharp. Decisions were final. Rivals were handled with calculated precision. To the outside world, Kang Min-Jae was still untouchable. But inside the quiet space between him and Zara, the ice had begun to thin. He started noticing things, how she tucked her pen behind her ear when concentrating, how she pressed her lips together when reviewing complicated schedules, how she always ensured others were acknowledged before herself. These were details he would normally dismiss as irrelevant. Now they mattered. During a late evening briefing, an executive criticized Zara for rescheduling a confidential meeting. The tone carried a hint of disrespect. The room went silent when Min-Jae slowly lifted his gaze. "She followed my instructions," he said evenly. No raised voice. No anger. But the warning was clear. The executive immediately apologized. Zara felt the weight of that protection. It unsettled her, not because she disliked it but because it felt personal. Later, as she organized files in his office, Min-Jae spoke without looking up from his desk. "You stayed calm last night." She paused. Panic wouldn't have helped. His eyes met hers. "Most people fear being close to me." "I'm not most people," she replied quietly. Something almost like a smile touched his expression before disappearing. That evening, as she prepared to leave, exhaustion finally caught up with her. She swayed slightly, barely noticeable. Min-Jae stood immediately. "You're tired?" "I'm fine," she insisted. Instead of arguing, he stepped forward and gently pulled her into a brief hug. Measured, controlled, but intentional. It wasn't about protection this time. It was gratitude. And for the first time, Kang Min-Jae realized he didn't just feel responsible for her safety. He felt responsible for her happiness. The Ice King was no longer just melting. He was beginning to feel. Powerful men rarely go unnoticed when they change. It started with whispers in hallways that went silent when Zara passed. Conversations cut short. Glances exchanged too quickly. The underworld had rules, and one of them was simple. Never give your enemies something to use against you. Zara Williams had become that something. Min-Jae noticed it before she did. Reports came in subtly at first. Rivals questioning his focus. Allies wondering why his assistant had access to private strategy sessions. Patterns were forming, and he refused to let her become a vulnerability. So he did the only thing he believed would keep her safe. He grew cold again. Meetings became strictly formal. His tone sharpened. Personal conversations disappeared. Where he once lingered after discussions, he now dismissed her quickly. The warmth that had begun to bloom between them froze over without explanation. Zara felt it immediately. She replayed every moment in her mind, searching for what she had done wrong. Had she overstepped? Misunderstood his gratitude? The silence between them became heavier than any threat. One evening, after being excluded from a confidential briefing she had always managed, she knocked on his office door. "Enter," he said flatly. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. "If I've made a mistake, I'd rather you tell me." His expression remained unreadable. "You haven't." Then why are you shutting me out? The question hung in the air. Min-Jae stood slowly. Because proximity to me is dangerous. I already know that, she replied calmly. You don't get to decide I'm fragile. Her voice wasn't angry. It was steady, resolute. For a moment, the mask slipped again. Conflict flickered in his eyes. I'm trying to protect you, he admitted. By pushing me away? Silence. Zara took a step closer. Not reckless, not emotional, just firm. You don't have to carry this alone. And you don't have to pretend you don't care. The truth settled between them. Outside those walls, enemies plotted. Inside, something stronger than fear was fighting to survive. And for the first time, Min-Jae realized that protecting her might not mean losing her. The decision came faster than Zara expected. By the end of the week, the tension had grown unbearable. Min-Jae's distance felt intentional now, carefully measured, painfully precise. He no longer asked if she had eaten. No longer lingered when she left the office. No longer allowed even the smallest crack in his composure. So Zara made a choice of her own. Her resignation letter sat neatly folded on his desk that evening. When Min-Jae returned from a private meeting, he noticed it immediately. He read it once, then again. His expression didn't change, but something inside him fractured. He found her on the rooftop of the building, the city of Seoul glittering endlessly beneath them. Wind tugged at her hair as she stood facing the skyline. You're leaving, he said quietly. Yes. The word was soft but unwavering. For your safety? He asked. For my peace, she replied. I won't stand beside someone who pretends I don't matter. Silence stretched between them, filled only by distant traffic and the hum of the city below. Min-Jae stepped closer. Not as the Mafia boss. Not as the Ice King. Just as a man who was tired of fighting himself. I thought pushing you away would keep you safe, he admitted. I was wrong. Zara turned to face him fully. His voice lowered, stripped of its usual steel. You walked into my world without fear. You stayed when you could have left. And when everything felt like chaos, you made it quiet. He swallowed once. You feel like paradise in a life built on storms. The confession wasn't dramatic. It wasn't loud. It was honest. Zara's eyes softened. Slowly, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him again, this time without hesitation. Min-Jae didn't stiffen. He held her firmly, protectively, as if anchoring himself to something real. Under the city lights, surrounded by danger and power and uncertainty, they stood together, not as boss and assistant, not as weakness and strength, but as two hearts choosing each other. And for the first time, Min-Jae wasn't afraid of what that meant. Love did not arrive in grand gestures for them. It came in small adjustments, quiet effort, intentional understanding. After the rooftop confession, nothing about Min-Jae's world suddenly became safe, but it became honest. He no longer pretended indifference. He no longer created distance disguised as protection. Instead, he invited Zara into the parts of his life he had kept guarded for years. One evening, he took her to visit his family's ancestral home on the outskirts of the city. The traditional Korean architecture stood in graceful contrast to the steel towers he ruled from. There, he spoke about legacy, about expectations placed on him as the eldest son, about discipline, about sacrifice. Zara listened without interrupting. Later, she showed him pieces of her own heritage. She shared stories of her Nigerian father's resilience and her mother's strength, of Sunday meals filled with laughter and loud conversations. She explained how community shaped her, how love in her family was expressive and unashamed. Min-Jae absorbed every word. He tasted the spicy dishes she introduced him to even when the heat made him pause. She, in turn, practiced simple Korean greetings with careful pronunciation, earning the rarest reward, a genuine smile from him. Their relationship did not rush forward recklessly. It deepened. Hugs became their silent reassurance after long meetings. When pressure mounted, he would rest his chin lightly against the top of her head. When exhaustion found her first, she would wrap her arms around him, grounding him without a single word. His men noticed the difference. The Ice King still commanded respect, still moved strategically, still made decisions without hesitation. But there was a steadiness to him now, a balance that hadn't existed before. Zara did not weaken him. She centered him. And in learning each other's cultures, histories, and scars, they built something stronger than attraction. They built partnership. Not just in love, but in understanding. The Empire had always been Min-Jae's world. Every decision, every alliance, every calculated risk was meant to strengthen it. Power was the language he knew best, the armor he never removed. but standing beside Zara changed the rules. He faced a choice that no one else in his life had ever forced upon him: continue expanding his empire ruthlessly, or protect the fragile, quiet happiness that had begun to take root with her. For years he had believed compromise was weakness. Now he realized it was courage. Late one night in his office, Min-Jae studied the city below. Lights sparkled like stars trapped in glass. Reports sat in neat piles. Expansion plans, potential acquisitions, even underground operations he had been grooming for years. Each one represented influence, money, control. Yet every line felt hollow compared to what he had gained in the past months. Zara's laughter echoed in his memory, soft, effortless, fearless. Her steady presence, the way she had hugged him when no one else dared, the way she understood him without needing explanations. That warmth, that calm, that quiet love, it was worth more than any empire. By morning the decision was made. He called a board meeting and one by one he announced changes. Certain ventures would no longer expand into dangerous territories. Risky partnerships would be restructured. Some operations were shifted entirely to legitimate business. His executives whispered, shocked. The Ice King was choosing differently. When Zara arrived that morning, she noticed it instantly. He was still commanding, still sharp, still precise. But the tension in his shoulders had eased. His eyes softened when they met hers. "You did this for me?" she asked quietly, unsure if she wanted to celebrate or scold him. "For us," he corrected, voice low but certain. And in that choice he proved that love was not a weakness, but the bravest decision of all. Threats never truly disappeared in Min-Jae's world. Shadows from the past lingered and enemies were patient. Just when he thought their bond was secure, a betrayal tested everything he and Zara had built. It started with whispers from within his inner circle. Someone feeding rivals information about her routines, her movements, and her presence in his life. Min-Jae's instinct was to remove her from the equation, to protect her by isolating her from the storm. But Zara had made it clear, she wasn't fragile and she refused to hide. That night, standing together in the office that overlooked the neon-lit streets, he watched her study a dossier, calm and resolute. "You don't have to do this alone," he reminded her, though he already knew she wouldn't back down. "I'm not afraid," she replied, eyes unwavering. "And I trust you enough to face it with me." For the first time, Min-Jae didn't feel the need to shield her completely. Instead, he stood beside her, not as boss and assistant, but as partner. Every move was calculated, every decision strategic. Together, they anticipated every maneuver their enemies might make, using logic, insight, and teamwork. As the storm closed in, allies turned into shadows, and threats attempted to divide them. But the unity between Min-Jae and Zara proved unbreakable. Hugs and tense moments became silent promises, words unnecessary when trust had been earned. By the time the dust settled, their enemies were exposed, outmaneuvered, and retreating. Zara had stood tall, proving strength could come in quiet determination, not intimidation. Min-Jae had realized that the true power in his life wasn't fear. It was loyalty, trust, and the love that had been quietly growing between them. For the first time he felt unshakable. Not because the world was safe, but because they were together. And in the middle of chaos, Min-Jae understood clearly, some storms are meant to be faced side by side. Their bond wasn't just surviving, it was stronger than ever. Years had passed since that first tense interview and the world around Kang Min-Jae had changed, but some things remained constant. The city still glittered at night, deals were still made in quiet offices, and threats occasionally loomed, but none of that mattered as much as the life he had built with Zara. The penthouse was quieter now, not from absence, but from peace. Books and personal mementos filled shelves, fragrant teas sat on polished tables, and framed photos of shared moments lined the walls. Min-Jae, once the Ice King, moved with a calm that only love could teach. Zara entered the room, holding a tray of fresh pastries, her bright smile catching him mid-thought. He rose from his seat, leaving behind the files and meetings, and she felt the same warmth that had drawn her to him years ago. No guards, no agendas, just the two of them. He took her hand gently. "You feel like paradise," he whispered, repeating the words that had once slipped out beneath city lights, now spoken with full certainty and devotion. Zara laughed softly, leaning into him. "And you make it feel safe," she replied. Their hugs, now a quiet ritual of comfort and reassurance, lasted longer than ever, unhurried and full of meaning. No words were needed. The warmth of connection, trust, and shared history spoke for them both. Outside, the city buzzed with life, but inside, time seemed to slow. Every choice, every risk, every moment they had endured had led to this. From the first interview, through dangers and misunderstandings, they had chosen each other over fear, over power, over everything else. Kang Min-Jae, once feared and untouchable, found in Zara a partner, a confidant, and a home. Zara, once cautious in a world of ruthless ambition, discovered that love could be both gentle and powerful. Together they stood on the balcony, arms wrapped around each other, gazing at a skyline that felt infinite. Forever wasn't just a promise anymore, it was reality. And in that embrace they both understood, paradise wasn't a place. It was the life they had chosen side by side.